Um, I am here to talk about property management and IREM, which is the Institute of Real Estate Management. I like to start out these meetings with just like a little quick video that the IREM organization has put together. So I'm going to share my screen and play the YouTube video.
Looking for a career where you can make an impact, be on the move, problem solve, and be rewarded for your effort and ambition? Picture yourself here. Real estate management professionals make a difference in the places where people live, work, and shop. A career in real estate management could be the right fit for you. Let's explore 3 important questions. First, what would you do? Specific duties and activities depend on the position, the type of property managed, and the hiring organization. Whether you're a frontline site manager responsible for the day-to-day operations of an apartment complex, a regional manager for multiple office buildings or shopping centers, or a management company executive, your primary responsibilities generally will fall into 5 key areas: managing the physical property, team management, finances, marketing and leasing, and legal and risk management. The fun part? You can count on every day being different, and your problem solving, communication, and management skills will be key. Question number 2. What types of opportunities does this profession offer? A broad range of organizations employ real estate managers, from property management firms and real estate developers to banks, government agencies, and insurance companies. Career opportunities for real estate managers are expected to grow steadily as the real estate and rental and leasing industries keep expanding. By 2024, it's estimated that more than 25,000 new positions will be added, bringing the total number of real estate management jobs in the U.S. to over 339,000. No doubt you're also wondering how much you can expect to earn as a real estate manager. Cash compensation usually combines annual base salary with an incentive bonus. While it depends on several factors, there's plenty of potential to earn 6 figures as you climb the career ladder. In addition, a lot of companies offer additional benefits and perks. That brings us to question number 3. How can you prepare to take advantage of these opportunities? You can earn a degree in real estate or property management, or you can move into it from another area of real estate like home sales, banking, or development. A degree in real estate is not a requirement, but it's highly recommended. Many colleges, universities, and community colleges offer courses and degrees in real estate and property management. Business administration, finance, or hospitality degrees also provide a great foundation. Internships, informational interviews, and job shadowing all are terrific ways to learn more about real estate management and whether it's the right career for you. Then, as you seek to advance your career, you can enhance your knowledge and credibility by earning professional credentials. IREM, the Institute of Real Estate Management and an affiliate of the National Association of Realtors, is a great career partner. We're eager to help open doors, build your skills, and empower you to make a meaningful impact through a fulfilling career in real estate management. Get the picture? Learn more about this great career and how we can help. Visit irem.org/careers.
Okay, so that was just a little bit about IREM and the industry. Hold on 1 second.
Now, and you're not really sure what the difference is between acquisitions and
1 second, sorry. Anyway, so that was just a little intro on IREM and the organization and the industry as a whole. I am on the board for IREM in Inland Empire. I'm actually the current sitting treasurer of that. So I'm involved on local and state and national levels of that organization. But I do like to come and I speak to the students, especially Cal Poly, because I'm an alumni of Cal Poly. And what a lot of the students don't understand, which I try to promote, is if you're an FRL major, and if you focus on the real estate track, when you graduate, you have already completed the necessary education requirements to take your CPM exam for IREM. And that's what I did, because when you join some of these trade associations and you're in the career and you're paying your annual dues and everything else, and if you calculate the cost of each one of their education sessions versus, you know, the way to fast track it through your degree, it was going to end up costing, I think at the time, between $10,000 to $12,000 just for their education. And I figured, well, I'm already paying for my degree. I might as well just get that focus since I know I'm going to stay in real estate management, and sort of kill two birds with one stone. But the benefit to that, though, is that you do get your CPM. And if you're going to continue, or if you're going to be in a career for real estate management, there's a wage difference for people that earn a CPM versus don't. And actually, I have a little infographic, sort of, it's a table from IREM. They conduct annual surveys in the industry, and I'll share that with you guys right now really quick. Okay, so here's like some compensation data. Now with IREM, there's different certifications that you can get. You can get a CPM, which is what I have, which stands for a Certified Property Manager. ARM is sort of the lower tier of that. It stands for Accredited Residential Manager. But anyway, so here's some tables. So this is just average compensation of ARM members. So you can see, and this is national, I should say also. The numbers for California tend to be higher. But you can see if you jump down here to CPM versus ARM, there's a significant jump. So if you're going to stay in property management, I would recommend you pursue that CPM designation, just to make it more worthwhile. So a little bit about me. I've managed residential and commercial, but when I say commercial, I don't mean multifamily. Well, sort of. I've managed multifamily. I don't really like that, though. I manage mostly industrial and office. So I have a little bit of a different perspective of the real estate and property management industry than what people generally think of as property managers. When I typically ask students, you know, what is your perspective on the property management industry? Usually the response I get is like something like apartment managers or single family home managers. They don't immediately go to the more complex stuff, which is like the industrial and office, high rise, things like that. And that's where I'm more comfortable. It does tend to get more complicated, so you'll definitely use everything that you learn in your FRL degree. There's really not a day that goes by that I'm not using finance, I'm not adjusting the risk management plans, or handling emergencies, or, you know, dealing with tenant relations and owner relations. So it's really, what is the word? You end up having to be really well-rounded in all of that, which is actually specifically why I went and chose Cal Poly, because of the multidisciplined approach. So I guess at this point, I guess I'll open it up for questions. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead and unmute or type them into the chat, and I'll be happy to answer.
I actually have a question, if you don't mind. Just out of curiosity, so when you graduated, you went right away for that CPM exam, and then how did you get a job? Like, that transition is the hardest one for me to understand.
Okay, so I'm a bit of a different case. So for my undergrad, I was having to work full time. And so my undergrad ended up taking about, between all the breaks I had, about 10 years. But I was already doing real estate management as a property manager while I was in school. And actually the week that I took that CPM exam, that was sort of hell week for me, because I literally went from finals and then immediately into the CPM exam. So it was like a week and a half of hell. But if any of you are like me, and if, like, I knew myself, and I knew if I had waited for the next opportunity to take the exam, I wasn't going to remember all of the content as much as I had already, you know, remembered it, because it was all, a lot of it is finance based. You know, they give you a case study that you have to sort of analyze, but it really is just capital budgeting 101 almost, at least for that case study that they provided to me. I don't know about, you know, other exams. But what I will say though is, when you talk to property managers, they will almost never tell you that they went into that intentionally as a career. Usually you sort of land in it. You end up in there. Me, for example, when I first started working, I was doing accounting. And that's how I actually got into the industry, was doing accounting. And then I became the accounting supervisor and everything for the smaller firm. And then at a certain point, I decided I didn't really like to just sit there and stare at invoices and receive payments and do kind of the AR/AP stuff and journal entries. I didn't want to do that 24/7 every time I went to work. And so I had talked to them, and I asked them if they could train me to do the property management side, because it looked like so much more fun. You know, you're going out, you're going to the properties, you're doing the inspections, you're dealing with tenants. Yeah, sometimes they're upset, whatever, that happens, but it's definitely more interesting than sitting at a desk doing numbers all day, every day. So, you know, the video did touch on that also, is even if you want to get into that, maybe start at a company. It doesn't have to be immediately property management, but, you know, a leasing consultant, or, you know, ARAP or something like that. And then you just sort of, you grow and you elevate and you learn, and then you get promoted. That's what typically happens a lot of times.
So do you have any other, I guess, suggestions or kind of maybe out of the box advice that you learned kind of after the fact on, you know, little jobs, or I guess lesser jobs or lower position or entry level jobs that we should get into to use as stepping stones?
You know, it really sort of depends what your end goal is, right? Because real estate management can be a very vast and diverse field, right? Because if you think about it, real estate is literally everywhere. You're on it, you're in it, you're using it, you're sleeping in it, you know, your employer has it, businesses have it, you know, it really depends. You know, there's people that are a part of my organization where they're a part of real estate management, but their position, their title is facilities director, right? But they're in charge of the real estate and other aspects for a corporation, you know. Or I know other people where they end up in insurance companies, and they're really effective on as like an adjuster for loss claims and things like that. But they have that real estate background. So when that stuff happens, they're sort of familiar. Or there's other people that they get into it from a construction standpoint. It really depends what your end goal is. You know, for me, what I want, like the bigger industrial projects, right? So I'm tailoring my approach and my career path for the companies that are managing that. Either that, or I'm going to go to other companies that might actually do the manufacturing that has a real estate department. You know, like every large corporation that you can think of, they have their own real estate department. But you're right, a lot of times it is, you know, that just getting your foot into the door. What I would say is maybe seek out entry-level positions in larger firms, maybe like CBRE, Jones Lang LaSalle, companies like that, because they always have new properties. They're always moving people around. And so it might be a more secure position also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question. When you went to Cal Poly Pomona, you were a FRL major, correct?
Correct.
And then what was your emphasis? Was it real estate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You know, one other thing that I'd like to mention too is if you're going to do property management, although in the entry-level positions it might not be required, but as you get into higher positions, a real estate license will be a requirement. So you guys should consider that also if you're thinking about that. The good thing though about that is when you have your license, you have additional career opportunities that wouldn't have been available, you know, otherwise. You know, for example, I do manage property for other people, but I am a licensed broker. And so I do have access to the MLS and all these other things that people don't normally have access to. And so I've started to do investing of my own on the side. So that kind of helps too, if you're thinking about it, because when you start getting into, you know, some of these trade associations and other things, and it all costs money, so it has to be worthwhile, at least for me. But the additional career opportunities and investment opportunities, to me, it's worth it.
Do you manage your own investments currently?
I do.
Okay. And then if you manage investments for other people, do you need any special license for that, or that falls under the real estate broker license?
So the way that the licensing works is if you're collecting the rents for somebody else, you need to have a broker's license. But if you're working underneath a broker, you only have to have a salesperson's license. But then another caveat to that is if you are managing subdivisions, so like HOAs, or there's even commercial HOAs, you don't have to have any licensing. So that's really just the caveat.
In our degree, pretty much once we complete all the courses for our degree in FRL, that also pretty much prepares us for the broker license as well, right?
For the most part, yeah.
Ellie, I was actually going to mention that for the salesperson and broker's license, there are specific classes you have to take in order to get the broker's or salesperson license. And I do have a list. I could send that over.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Of course.
You send that to me too.
Yeah, of course. I could maybe next week I could put it in the slides so you guys could see it. The picture is not the greatest, so I'll write it out for everyone.
Okay, so Marvin asked if I had done any internships. I was working the entire time for my undergrad, so I did not do any internships. I do know that often, you know, companies will offer them. You know, I've sent opportunities in the past to like Dr. Welke for things that come up, and I know that while I was on the e-board for REA when I was at Cal Poly, we were trying to get started some sort of mentorship program, but it didn't really come to fruition just because of scheduling and the limitations from the mentors. That was a big hurdle too. So sorry, Marvin, that's really the only advice that I have, or the only info.
I had one more question. Right now, I'm actually have an emphasis in law for my FRL degree. Yeah. But I was curious, how often do you use or rely on your contract management knowledge or know-how in your day-to-day activities as a property manager?
Oh, constant. It's literally constant. You know, because I'm even though there's forms, we're constantly drafting up, modifying, and amending, you know, the leases. And what I do at least is commercial leases for the most part. So I'm not really doing residential where it's literally just plug and play. But it tends to be more complicated for sure. So then there's the lease aspect of it, but then there's also the vendor contracting aspect of it, because I'm constantly hiring, firing, and everything, our vendors on different properties or projects, or, you know, there's all sorts of moving parts. So the legal aspect of it is absolutely imperative. I've known a number of people in the real estate management industry where they've made simple mistakes in their contracts that, you know, if anybody who had any sort of knowledge of law in general and contracting and business law, etc., they wouldn't have lost an account, or they wouldn't have had to pay damages or anything like that. So it does come into play a lot for different things that we do.
Right. And besides your own knowledge, do you have anyone at the firm or business that you're working at that you can kind of have double check contracts, or is it all solely your responsibility to make sure everything's legally sound?
So as a broker, I'm not a lawyer. Aside from minor modifications, we always tell clients, you know, they need to have their contracts reviewed by the attorney. And most of them, at least all of my clients, all have an attorney on retainer. So, you know, if there's any other question or anything like that, I just email or pitch it to them really quick, and they tell me yes, no, whatever.
So your company doesn't have an attorney or lawyer on retainer for their side of contracts. You always rely on the client's attorney to check.
Right, because we're the managing agent. So we're acting as agent for the client. So it's the client that needs to be represented by the attorney. My company has our own counsel for our own things, but because of attorney-client privilege and all of that stuff, the client has to have their own attorney.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question in regards to maybe something you would recommend for us to read or even watch, or like a website that you highly recommend just to kind of keep us in the know of the field, something maybe you're passionate about. Any suggestions? That's all.
You know, property management industry as a whole is a bit disjointed, only because even though we all have pretty much the same title as property manager, there is bias, you know, within the industry. So the commercial managers tend to not really affiliate themselves too much with the residential managers, and vice versa. A lot of them, the commercial ones, especially when you get into higher positions at like larger companies like CPP REA and things like that, they tend to sort of look down on the residential managers. And then, so it's really segmented. And that's one thing that if you decide to go into it, you know, find a property type that fits your personality. I won't touch multifamily or single family homes just because the type of tenants that you're dealing with, they're more emotionally charged because that's where they're living. I prefer to deal with commercial tenants where it's less emotional, it's just matter of fact, you know, black and white, and it's just business. But, you know, if you want to stay updated on the industry, even that can be difficult because it's all different by state, right? There's not really too many national laws that apply to all properties or all property managers across the United States. You know, there's trade organizations like IREM, which is national, but we all have, you know, there's a state chapter, and then there's local regional boards. And we all, like for example, when I pay my IREM dues, part of my dues goes to pay a lobbyist to deal with laws that affect the real estate management industry in California. So I guess just following like IREM, or there's other ones, depending on the property type. Like there's a separate trade organization for apartments and other industrial properties and things like that you could follow. They tend to be more up to date. As far as reading, you know, I think the education that you're getting is already a good primer on sort of what to deal with. There's one thing though that, at least for me, that's been very useful, is learning how the construction trades all work, and you know, the contracting part of it, and general contractors and the different trades that go along with everything. And learning how to read plans and as-built and everything else. That's not a skill that they teach you in school, but when you start doing larger like capital projects, it's imperative that you know what you're reading and that you're looking at. But a lot of that kind of stuff is just things that you end up learning on the job.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate your answer.
Mm-hmm.
So when you said something that you won't touch the multifamily,
yeah,
residential, because they are emotionally charged. I understand that this is the case professionally, but for your own personal investments, is that also the case as well?
So for my personal investments, I have started out on single family homes. And actually my personal investments, none of them, well, I wouldn't say none of them, but most of them are out of state, because I haven't found the yields on California properties to be worth it for me personally. So I am managing the out-of-state properties myself. But before I acquire them, though, I'm doing my due diligence and I'm sort of qualifying the tenants, because what I like to do is buy it with existing tenants and sort of just take over with them there, so it's immediately cash flowing. But that's not everybody's strategy, right? That's just what I'm comfortable with. So far, I haven't had too many issues with that at all. But for me personally, that's just a stepping stone, right? Because when I am able to get to the point where I'm investing in like an industrial office park, I'm going to do that, right? But the barrier of entry to get to like single family home, to multifamily, and then to commercial, there's a huge jump. And it's the financing aspect of it, it's the down payment aspect, it's all of that. Just tends to be more complicated. And the loan offerings for commercial are not as favorable as single family homes, for example. Like those ones, you know, you can just get, you know, your standard 30-year fixed with, you know, whatever down. For commercial, that's not the terms. Usually you have a shorter term with a balloon payment, and a lot of them can be adjustable. So it's the residential properties, for me at least personally, like I said, are just a stepping stone.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
With your existing investments out of state, how do you really manage, let's say, repairs or dealing with contractors since you are out of state and you can't really, meet them in person or, qualify which contractors you go through besides the internet? How do you deal with that?
So the good thing about the age that we're living in, the digital age, is for the most part, everything is online and accessible, right? There's just a few things that you have to do differently to qualify the contractors and handyman or whatever that you're using from out of state. But a lot of that still ends up being sort of word of mouth from the tenants also, because the tenants are there. They hear and see and know things that aren't immediately known to you. So I'll talk to the tenants, or sometimes I'll just have the tenant deal with it, and I'll dock some of it off the rent depending on what it is or what caused it, etc. But honestly, like with what I do for property management, even here in California on the properties that I'm managing here for other clients, what I'm doing for the most part is on the phone and via email anyway. There's times when I do have to go on site and double check and verify work before any issue is paid or any payment is issued. But that can still be done remotely via, telephones, text messages, videos, etc. And as long as everything's working and the tenant gives the okay also, then it hasn't been an issue.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, somebody had asked a question on rent control and how does that affect my industry? Well, let me preface it by saying I was very upset when California passed the rent control laws. That tends to be a conflicting subject in the industry for the most part, only because of the way that the law was actually written. There's a lot of caveats to it. And when you're in the real estate industry, what you end up seeing, and I'm sure you guys learned this in your undergrad education also, is rent control tends to be a bad thing. The city of Los Angeles has had rent control for a long time. And that's why you have a lot of deferred maintenance on buildings that are not properly maintained, and it leads to tenants living in squalor. And with the rental market in areas like New York and Los Angeles specifically, where there is existing rent control before the law passed, the market prices were high to begin with. And so when you have investor owners that are purchasing ridiculous prices at like a 3% cap rate, there's not too much incentive for them to rehab and make improvements to the properties. Their whole game is to retain what little cash flow that they have. And then plus, you have a lot of tenants that are there super long term, that have been paying way below market rent, and there's limited things that you can do to bring that up. On the surface, it might sound like a good thing, But at the end of the day, the policy does more harm than good. So I hope that answers your question, Clayton. Any other questions?
Edward, if you're trying to talk, your mic isn't working properly. You could just type it in the chat.
So I got a question, and it says, since you were FRL major with an emphasis in real estate, how are you able to transition from accounting to your job now, where you deal with all these different components like law? You know, with the company that I was at, I just asked and to see if they would train me to do that. And they said yes. So it really depends. You know, even when I was dealing with the accounting stuff, I was still dealing with other things, you know, other than just straight numbers, you know, because what ends up happening is in the accounting departments for property management firms, you're still dealing with the contracts for vendors, you're still dealing with the tenant agreements, because you have to make sure everything sort of ticks and ties and everything is being billed and paid correctly. Because at least on a licensing standpoint, the Department of Real Estate, they hyper focus on the accounting side of it. When you get audited, they are exclusively about the numbers, and they will cite you for any little small thing. So it's important for you to be extremely competent in accounting and finance and things like that.
I wanted to go back to how you answered Clayton's question.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in regards to forbearance, and also interest rates are extremely low. So I believe, you know, the Fed, our government, clearly knows what they're doing so that the real estate market is stabilized. What do you foresee happening? Because there's two sides right now, right? Some people believe a real recession is going to hit anytime now. Some people believe it's being postponed, essentially, right? Because obviously you touched on how it's hurting the industry that people are allowed to, you know, not pay their mortgage or not default, things like that. So what do you foresee happening? Do you see us getting out of this and the real estate market being stable still, or do you feel that there might be another like recession or a bubble that's going to pop?
So within the industry, there's no question that there's going to be some sort of a bubble. What we don't know is how bad it's going to be. I don't think, and a lot of people that I talk to also don't think it's going to be as bad as like the 0809 one, because you have different forces that are behind it, right? You know, 0809, you had the entire mortgage industry writing bad loans to people that couldn't afford it. Right now, you have people that just can't afford their rent payments or their mortgages, but it's not, it's a little bit more to that. And to touch on the rates right now are artificially low. They're low only because of intervention. And the reports that I've read indicate that it's going to be low for a while, only because of how bad the state of our economy really is. What I'm seeing is a lot of people are playing with their numbers, and this sort of goes back into your finance education. You know, pay attention to your corporate finance classes. One of the big things that I learned while I was in school, and again, I was working simultaneously in the industry, is I learned sort of all the different ways that people tend to play with their books to make it their books to look healthier, right? But it's just a finance and a numbers game. That's what I'm seeing a lot happen on the stock market. That's what's happening to the low Fed rate right now. You know, we're still not out of it. The good thing though is that this is not happening on like a nationwide scale, the same level all over. You know, here where we are, it's bad. Other parts of the country, people are back to work. It's less of an issue. So there's not going to be like this major bubble that happened last time. But, you know, you never know. Things could change. Even to this day, I'm still seeing residual after effects from people who couldn't pay during 08, 09. You know, and you're talking, you know, 12 years later. But it's just that government and everybody tends to be slow to react. So I hope that answers your question.
You definitely did. You did. We're in a, some people on this call are in a investments class, and we're trying to project and kind of foresee what's going to happen. So you definitely answered. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
So just to kind of piggyback on that one, because I know that question is coming from the fact that I know that Fanny Mae recently did that whole pretty much almost like a bailout type thing for the property owners, that they're allowing anybody with those type of mortgages to essentially not pay their mortgage for, you know, a few months, and they'll tack it on at the end of the mortgage. So do you see that happening right now with commercial stuff too? Or, because I know Fanny is pretty much only residential, so.
Yeah, the commercial ones, at least on the mortgage side of it, it's a lot different than the residential side. You know, if they're able to get backed by Fannie or Freddie, which most of them can't, you know, they might fall into that camp, but that's not the way that commercial loans are underwritten. But at least on what I deal with, because I deal with mostly industrial, most of my tenants, you know, they're big box tenants, so they haven't stopped. They haven't really been affected by it. Some of my other properties where there's like smaller, you know, 1,000-foot industrial warehouse spaces, there has been a few tenants that have been affected, but it's because their businesses were like more towards events and things like that, which has been absolutely shut down. But for the most part, on the commercial side, and at least for what I do, this is not to say retail. Retail is getting hit really hard, especially small retail. It hasn't affected like my side of the industry too much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost 1 o'clock, and I'm sure people have class after. For those who came in late, I'm gonna post the sign-in sheet and the contact info of Jack Haley, who works at Lee & Associates. He asked me to let you guys know that he has a job opportunity. It is entry intern level, so there it is. I recommend you guys email him. He didn't give me much information about the position. And Sarah, thank you so much for today.
You're welcome.
Do you want to put your contact information in there too, just in case anyone has further questions for you? They could email you separately.
Yeah, I'll post my email right now in the chat.
Okay.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, everyone. Okay. All right, I just posted it.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Sarah. I'll email you after this just to touch base again.
All right, thank you.
Of course. Have a great day.
You too, bye-bye.
And I'll hang back if anyone has any questions for me.
Thank you.
Of course. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
You too.